Hello, awesome students. We're going to continue our discussion of vertebrates with the amphibians. So we're in Kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata because of the presence of the notochord, subphylum Vertebrata because there's a backbone, and class Amphibia. Amphibian means double life. We find that these organisms live on land and in water. So the adults live on land, but the young must live in water. Now there's a reason, well actually two reasons why the amphibians cannot solely abandon their aquatic environments. Reason one is that they must reproduce in water because their eggs have no support from the sun. We talked about protection from the sun with many of the invertebrates, and just like with those who live in water, they must reproduce in water because their eggs have to be kept in a moist environment because there's no protection from the sun. Also, the amphibian skin has a mucus covering which helps them with breathing and gas exchange, and we will talk about that a little bit later in the lesson. Now there are four groups of amphibians: the frogs, the toads, the salamanders, and the newts, as we see here. So here's the salamander, here's the toad, here's the newt, and purposely the frog is absent because everyone knows what a frog looks like. Now, it is important to know that amphibians are what we call indicator species. This word right here in red, indicator species. What this means is that they help us to determine the pollution of a body of water. For example, if frogs die off, or if they have mutations like, for instance, let's say 2 heads or 2 tails, that of course we would see in the tadpoles, then that means that the pond in which they live has pollutants. And remember, this pond is in neighborhoods where children play, adults live, and there are families and other communities. So if the water is polluted, then that means there could potentially be some harmful effects for the other living beings in the neighborhood. So basically, what an indicator species does for us is it gives us an assessment of the overall health of the environment. I'm going to repeat that because I'm pretty sure you're going to see it again and will be asked to recall it. So know that an indicator species gives us an assessment of the overall health of the environment. Now, let's look at how amphibians make the jump from water to land. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the reproduction happens in the water. So therefore, the frog spawns, what they're called, are in the water. Now, as it continues from a spawn to a tadpole after 2 days, you see the actual organisms change. And then it gets into a 2-week-old tadpole. And then we see here that the 8-week-old tadpole actually has some legs. But let me go back here to point out that in the 2-day-old tadpole, we actually do see gills here, which helps it to breathe while it's in water. Now, once we leave the 8-week-old tadpole, we get into the 10-week-old tadpole, and then it continues to grow into a full adult frog. Now, that actually has lungs. So the tadpole has gills, and the adult frog has lungs. It's important for me to note that this is not complete metamorphosis as we saw with some of the insects back in the invertebrate groups. That is strictly for insects only, the complete metamorphosis. This just simply shows the life cycle of the frog as it goes from an aquatic tadpole with gills to a land living adult that actually has lungs. Now, there are several advancements that the amphibians have made to make them suitable to live on land. One is actually the mucus layer that I mentioned with the body covering that helps it breathe and with gas exchange in the environment. Also, there's energy that is actually generated by the heart, and we find that the amphibians have a 3-chambered heart that we will actually talk about in class. And then we actually see some logic going on with the brain. Now, our geek of the week would be Dr. Jacques Cousteau, who was born in 1910 in France and died in 1997. What is important about Dr. Cousteau is that he produced over 115 documentary films on marine life aboard his ship, Calypso. Now, there were several things that Dr. Cousteau did, but the 5 most important things were that he pioneered scuba gear after World War II. He intervened to restrict international whaling. He led the campaign to prevent French nuclear waste dumping in the Mediterranean Sea. He also helped to engineer underwater base camps, and what these underwater base camps are basically research facilities that are actually underwater where scientists live for short periods of time to help us figure out what's going on under the water or beneath the water surface. And he also did books, TV shows, lectures, and so forth to bring awareness to marine life, like the rare sea tiger that we see here. Now, there are some homework questions for you to answer, so please answer them, and we will entertain any questions that you have in class and be prepared to learn about the amphibian heart when I see you next time. Have a good one.